Hey everyone, and thanks for tuning in today to the Driven to Better podcast, where everyone you'll hear is driven to make business better. I'm your host, Justin Sisley, and on the show today is Matt Lee of shiporgetoffthepot.com. That's ship with a P. Matt is going to share with us his journey as well as offer up some insights into the less tangible aspects of being an entrepreneur. So stay tuned, we've got a great show ahead. Today we have on the show Matt Lee, and he's going to tell us a little bit about what he's got going on. Matt, you've been an entrepreneur for a while, right?
Yeah, I'd say the majority of my life.
Okay, perfect. Well, why don't you give us kind of the elevator pitch on what's your main project right now?
Well, I got a couple of projects, but I know you interviewed some of my partners in 100 Innovation, 100 State stuff. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about my book right now, Ship or Get Off the Pot.
That's ship with a P, like Paul.
Yeah, ship, as in ship the product. Because I got so many entrepreneurs, the title came from so many entrepreneurs, they all the time, or want to be entrepreneurs, are saying, hey, I'm going to build this, I'm going to build that. Well, shut up, get it shipped, and, get those pre-sales. So that's where the title came from originally.
Okay, and this book is, I take it then, a book about how to do.
Yeah, originally, when I started writing Ship or Get Off the Pot, I've actually gone through a couple revisions of it. It's been like the bane of my existence, but at the same time, it's one of the greatest endeavors I've ever taken. And when I first started writing it, I tried throwing in everything I knew about entrepreneurialism. But I thought, man, I should take my own advice here. And I trimmed it down, and actually, I think I'm going to release a couple different smaller books, easy to digest, quick $5 books that I can learn from and iterate from and self-publish before I go out there, because I have been talking to publishers, but I'd like to get this platform up. And so the main part I'm working on right now is, I call it Ship or Get Off the Pot Innovation. It's about entrepreneurship. And so with entrepreneurship, that's actually a lot of what I consult on. Large companies bring me in to help them set up startups inside of them. These large established companies, they see something on the horizon right now. They've been doing business the same way for how many years, and now all of a sudden technology is changing everything quicker than they can possibly handle it. So they're like, oh God, how do I handle all this this change? And so they see startups solving problems and taking market share away from them, solving problems in interesting ways. I mean, look at the way that the Ubers are stealing, business from the taxi cab companies, and the Airbnbs are borrowing business from the markets for the hotel industry. And so now they're like, okay, well, how do we get ahead of the curve on this one? So they can either try and act like a startup, and if they're these giant companies, it's very difficult to. Or they can try and acquire startups. And then what happens? You try and awkwardly fold a culture of 7 people into a culture of 100 people or 1,000 people that has been doing things the same way. And I don't know about you, but most startup guys like being able to come to work in sweatpants, and most large organizations have trouble with that. Mm-hmm. And so my book, in a lot of ways, is about the flaws in that. I don't know if you're familiar with Dunbar's number, but Dunbar's number is basically a rough estimate of the number of human, interactions you can have, or human relationships you can have. So you get these companies that are surpassed Dunbar number, and then people argue somewhere between 125 people and 200 people, roughly. Once you get an organization that big, if you're at the top, you're employing strangers, and so you don't know everybody. And so you create this, in order to maintain control of that, you create hierarchies. And, hierarchies have been kind of evolved over time. They started, way back in, during the kingdoms of old, you had this hierarchy, and at the top was the king. And, they use them in armies to keep control there, and they use them in the mafia as well. I mean, they use it, hierarchies of people are very useful. But in a world where everything's changing real quickly, the time it takes for information to pass from the bottom of that hierarchy to the top, from the front line, the trenches, down, all the way up to the general, that takes a lot of time, and that it basically goes through a human game of telephone as it raises through the ranks. So by the time it gets to you, it's inaccurate, and it's downright delayed, too late to do anything about it. So a really cool thing that, armies have evolved, and even the mafia, is they have commander's intent. They basically give autonomy, a certain amount of autonomy to their, platoons out in the field. And they say, their direct command is take that hill by going through the ravine to the east and around and up to the back and go. Now, if you, and of course in the army times, the communication gets cut off all the time, more likely than not. So commander's intent is to take the hill. The command may have been to go through the ravine, but if the ravine's getting hit with artillery, you don't want them marching into it like lemmings. You want them to be able to make that game time decision, say, no, we're not going to march to the artillery. We're going to do something smart. And so that's more evolution based. That's happened, through years of basically, battles being won and lost. And they say, okay, that worked by giving our people a little bit of autonomy. In business, it doesn't work like that yet. What happens is it's not a life or death situation. It's like, wait, hold on. We don't want to damage the brand. Don't do anything.
Yeah.
Until we say so. And so you don't have that autonomy. And autonomy goes a long way in people's happiness. They feel more happy if they're in control of their destiny, or in control of something. But if you can't even send out an email without being afraid you're going to get yelled at, well, then there's a problem. So I talk about how, the Googles have the 20% time. That's 20% of your time that you're allowed to control your own, what you're working on. That's really cool. People really get excited about that. And obviously, Google has some really exciting stuff coming out. Same thing, Facebook, when they acquired Instagram, and Amazon, when they acquired Zappos, they didn't take them and try and fold them into their company's culture and all that stuff. They didn't try and fold them in, say this brand, now it's Faceagram, whatever. They just said, you guys are doing great. Keep funneling people to our stuff, and here the commander's intent is to get us more users, get us more market share, make more sales, and you're good to go. And they offer them that autonomy, and it's really an amazing thing. So, in my book, I talk a lot actually about people, and about a little bit about leadership, and how you can keep them driven and motivated, and not just the lemmings that march blindly. And it's actually worked out really well. I did a pretty high profile job. It's not completely public yet, with a large construction company here in town last year, and we built a team that I believe, last I checked, is going 8 people strong. Get funding, and the team's really passionate, loving it, and they're just blowing up. And so it's a really exciting thing to see this work. And now my goal is to put it on paper and share it with other companies.
Awesome.
So Matt, in your book, is it more of a guidebook for large companies looking to go down this path of entrepreneurship, or adopting practices that aren't normal for them, or it's kind of reflecting on your experiences?
It's got a little bit of my experiences in it, but it's got a lot of real world examples as well. Some people that have done well, and some people that have not done well. But it's not a step by step manual so much, because it's a completely different philosophy of thinking about it. The ability to think of your employees as people capable of making their own decisions is something that a lot of these large companies don't do. I mean, there's a really good book I just read called Leaders Eat Last, and they talked about how there was a factory that was acquired, and these are just factory workers. We're talking probably, if we're lucky, high school education. And they didn't give anybody any autonomy. If they wanted to make a phone call to tell their kids they're going to be home late from the factory that day, or because something was happening, they actually had to ask permission. And punching the time clock too, it's very demoralizing. They don't have there's no trust in your employees, and if you don't trust your team members, you don't trust the people, and they don't trust you, and it's very tough to go to the front line and hit as hard as you can, to march into oblivion if you don't trust that the sergeant behind you is, got your back, and that the person behind, the lieutenant behind him and the general behind him all have your back, and it's very demoralizing. But if you actually trust these people and you give them that autonomy, you can see some amazing things. And the good thing is, we're in startup, we're in tech. I wouldn't do the same thing in a life or death situation. I wouldn't do that
Sure.
with doctors. But all the same, with tech, I'm happy to give that junior level developer a bit of autonomy. Say, go out there and build something and show me, what's cool, and give them just enough. And I talk about putting in a little bit of buffer. So it's like, release the product in an alpha form and call it labs. PayPal did a great job of this with PayPal Labs. Google does a great job of issuing it, and there's actually a really great way to build up a lot of steam by issuing so many invites. I don't want to get into the details of that, but overall, it's a philosophical. There's some real world tips and there's some philosophical stuff, but it's not a manual. It's not like 1, 2, 3 and then you're there. It doesn't work like that. You just got to change the way you think about it, and you got to trust the people that you hire.
Sure. Now, Matt, that's some pretty insightful stuff. Can you go into a little bit more detail about how you learned all of this, or were you kind of conducting your own research, or is this all? Yeah, I guess just elaborate on where you came up with this.
Well, I don't know if you want to. We can jump back to my history a little bit, so I can tell you how I all got started. But it definitely. I don't have a Harvard MBA or anything of that nature. That's for sure. I am the exact opposite. I was that kid that had trouble following directions. As a matter of fact, I remember one time when I was a kid, they gave me instructions to make a kite, or not a kite, sorry, a paper plane. Paper plane. Someone gave me instructions to make a paper plane, and I stopped reading the instructions halfway through. I got the two corners folded, and I got like a little bit of it made, so it was just a little bit aerodynamic enough. And I said, screw this, I'm taping a string to the front of it, and I was running around, and I had this plane that would fly forever as long as I ran, but it wasn't like a regular paper plane because I couldn't follow the instructions. So they say that I'm dyslexic as all can be, so they say that about dyslexic people, they have trouble following those directions. So I was constantly having to find interesting ways to reinvent and make and adapt for my shortcomings, which, I'm spelling, and the funny thing is I'm writing a book, but my spelling and grammar is atrocious. I still can't spell the word finally. I think it was like 20-something before I could properly spell my middle name.
Oh, wow.
I'm not going to get into detail there, but all in all, that wasn't me. So I've always had to kind of fend and find a different way. And so one of the really cool things that I got into growing up, this actually is going to transition, that's my entrepreneurial side, but the side about leadership and that is when I was, of course I was a troublemaker. When I was a sophomore in high school, I was getting into a lot of trouble, and all the cool kids would be on the far side of the street smoking cigarettes, and one day I was crossing the street, and I pretty much ran out between two buses and got hit by a car.
What?
And the car, I flipped over the hood, and I still remember the license plate to this day. I'm not going to put it on the podcast, but I still remember the license plate to this day. I flipped over the hood and landed on the ground, and I ended up getting on the bus and going home, but I had to go to the hospital after that, and my mom was insistent of it. And I don't know if you've ever been to Racine, but it's a very interesting place. The police wrote me a jaywalking ticket. And so I had to serve community service on that. And when I served community service on that, I actually ended up serving at the YMCA, became a lifeguard there. Long story short, I was upstairs. There was a gymnastics program upstairs. I was 16 at the time, and some of the 16-year-old gymnasts where I was flirting with, of course, I was a 16-year-old. And the gym manager, the head coach or whatever, she had heard her back. She's like, "You look like a meathead." And I was like, she's like, do you want to learn how to spot these kids and coach? I'm like, learn how to coach like flips and stuff? Yes. So I started coaching, and I've been coaching now. I just spent all summer at Woodward Gymnastics Camp, one of the largest gymnastics camps, action sports, and a lot of other things. Really amazing place, but I spent the last 3 months there. I mean, so that's how much it's made a huge impact on my life. But I'll tell you one thing, coaching teenagers, both boys and girls, because I've coached boys as well, coaching teenagers has taught me a lot about what not to do and how not to lead and how to lead, and like it's cool that the same thing applies to them. It's like if you give them step A, step B, step C, directions, it's like, all right, this is boring, but if you give them a little bit of autonomy and the right balance of like structure, I've had some really amazing athletes, not just like high competitive. I had high competitive athletes, but like athletes that have done really amazing things. I had one athlete, she actually started I'm going to get teary if I don't know. All right. I had this one athlete that started a charity for one of the gym owners that I coach. I had one of my good friends, and she actually basically took up a collection. They'd been doing this all season, and took up a collection for him basically through some competitive aspects. I'm not sure. I don't want to go into details basically, but at the end of the season, she basically handed him a couple $100 check. I mean, what teenager do you know does that? Organizes that. So I've seen this amazing stuff happen on such a small micro level. And of course, I studied, and just read the news and study Google and all those other guys and what they're doing. You can see it on a giant level as well, and I'm somewhere in between.
Huh.
Well, you bring up a good point, and something that I've experienced as well. I mean, when I was in high school, I worked at Target, and I was on a team. I wasn't a cashier or the sales floor people. We were on a team that actually sets up new aisles and all that stuff. Basically, when they move stuff and you can't find it and you're frustrated, that's what we did. We moved everything around the store, but we had team members like that who you could tell when we had different bosses, because we kind of floated between a couple teams once in a while. But the one boss we had on this team, I mean, she basically gave us almost full autonomy. And we got so much done that we were actually being sent off to new stores that were just opening to set up their stores because we were so good at what we did. And she rarely gave an order. I mean, it was pretty much just she trusted us until she couldn't. We never gave her a reason not to. But then, working at other teams at Target, you had the bosses who were just like total, they had to have their hand in everything that you did. And those were the ones who you just felt like you were going to work and just doing what this person told you, and there was no motivation to do well because they took credit for anything that was good, and then you took credit for anything that got screwed up. So you hit on a really great point there, that there's just in corporate culture today is getting better. It certainly is, but somehow we got into this mentality that bosses need to govern every little aspect of their underlings, and we do that on levels that go up and up and up to the CEO, and it's not going to work anymore.
And so the trick is how do you give everyone enough rope to build a little kite or something innovation like that, or to climb a gorge, but not enough rope to hang themselves, And so that's one of the things that's the final chapter, section of my book, is about how I've done that with tech people and how the greats have done it in amazing ways, where you can give these people the autonomy but still not have to worry about, downtime. Because downtime for a sizable tech startup, if you're 99% up, you're dead in the water. You're dead. 99.9%, you're still an amateur. 99.99% uptime, you're getting there. But how do you keep your core from even flickering? Well, you at the same time give people the ability to add on, to dream up new features, and stuff like that. That's somewhat peripheral to it. And so I that's the last part of my book is a guide on how to actually specifically, give them that autonomy without giving them enough autonomy to go off in the deep end and do something you don't want them to do.
Matt, quick question. Do some of the principles you talk about apply to a smaller tech company environment, like even a startup with a couple of people?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the startup, the 100 innovation team right now, the people I'm bringing on, junior devs, they're extremely raw, but extremely passionate. And so, I mean, that's one of the things I do now. When I was younger, and this is very common, is they just try and slap as many architects in the kitchen as you can. You get too many chefs in the kitchen. Every single one of them, veteran architect, years of experience, has their own way of doing it. And what do you get? 10 different ways people trying to go 10 different directions at once, a whole bunch of bickering and arguing, and a lot of trouble. Now, if you take one veteran architect, one chef, you have them basically, you set them up with a series of apprentices, the apprenticeship model, and I think that's very important right now. I can go on about the education system and how important the apprenticeship model is and how it's evolutionary based, but you give them a couple of apprentices, and you'll get some really amazing stuff, really incredible stuff. And so that's another thing I talk about, is how to structure your team so you've got, a senior developer mentoring a couple of junior developers, and you can allow that, and you get these small teams that can do that. It's worked out real well for me.
I want to talk now about, you've been kind of, since you were 16, I guess, is when that entrepreneur bug kind of hit you, when you started coaching and realizing that you could do things on your own.
Hey everyone, thanks again for listening. I want to break in quickly just to give a quick shout out and thank you to our sponsors, starting with MadisonInABox.com. It's the perfect gift for anyone with a connection to the great city that I call home. Someone who used to live here, is a university alum, or maybe just someone who would appreciate a taste of our local culture. Send friends, family, and loved ones the gift of Madison in a box. Head over to MadisonInABox.com to learn more about this unique gift idea. Our other sponsor for the show is Fruitera.co. Get ready to blend organic smoothies in under 30 seconds. And the best part is they're shipped right to your door. There's several flavors to choose from, so head over to Fruitera.co to learn more. And while you're there, drop them an email. Say, hey, thanks for sponsoring the Driven to Better podcast. I really appreciate it. All right, back to the show.
Well, when I was even younger than that, I remember once I tried going door-to-door selling lemonade until my mom stopped me and said it was like I could get abducted. So it started a little earlier than that, but you got the right idea.
Okay. So I want to talk about then, you've had years of entrepreneurship under your belt now, so you had to have experienced failure. Is there a time that you can think of, maybe a story you can tell us, take us to a place where you really just failed, that you just fell on your face?
Absolutely. Quite literally, too. In gymnastics, I landed on my face. But no, with entrepreneurialism, I can think of some of my larger flops. When I was... let's see, I think I was probably 19 or 20. The reason I dropped out of college, which don't worry, I wasn't going anywhere to college anyway. But I was the gym owner, one of my great friends and mentors, had an idea for a gym management software called Flip-Flop Software. I basically did the opposite of lean methodology. You guys, familiar with that? Build, measure, learn, pre-sell, and everything like that. No, I did the architect's dilemma. And the architect's dilemma is where you lock yourself in a closet away from everybody, and you're like, I'm going to build it, and if I build it, they will come, and I'm going to spend all this hours, and I built out everything. I had immaculate backups. The code was beautiful. It worked. It wasn't the prettiest thing because I didn't realize how bad of a designer I was, but it worked. It was all very, very functional. And then I went to bring it to market. I had spent a huge amount of my personal run, my life savings, on basically on building it. And the last ditch effort, I decided to go to Vegas to try and sell it to a bunch of people at the conference with my last basically dime. And I went there and realized that. No offense to my gymnastics club owning friends, but the majority of club owners, not all of my friend Jay's ahead of the curve, but that's the thing. The rest of them are a lot of them are small business owners, so they're rather cheap. No offense, I'm cheap, and you think the old school Russian type. They're not very tech savvy, so there was a ton of hand holding on everything there. And it was extremely difficult to make sales, and the product market fit wasn't it. And to be honest, I wasn't the marketer I am now, or I had a lot to learn about marketing and sales, and so I didn't make a single sale, and had spent my entire life savings on that. And so it's the first time I lost my life savings. There's a second time too, but that's one of the bigger flops.
Okay, and so obviously you've learned from that now. Maybe are you leaning towards more of a lean methodology on things you start going forward?
I probably have half a dozen pre-sale pages out there.
Okay.
So I'll dream stuff up and that'll be on pre-sale. Use launchrock.com, have the pre-sale up. I think I put a pre-sale up last week for something. It hasn't gone great, but I'd gotten 2 emails on a project I did months ago, then published and just open sourced about people trying to buy the technology. So I had a feeling I had something. So,
well, I'm curious. What is it that? So you got the book coming out, and that's a couple weeks away yet?
I'm hoping to have it out November 1st in time for the holiday season.
Okay.
Like I said, it's not going to be a very long book. It'll be pretty short, and that's probably mainly the digital copy, and we're going to use that to gauge where it goes next.
Okay. So then my question is, what is it that you do to make money? How do you live right now, Matt?
So luckily, back to my history, I started programming in the 6th grade. My father's HVAC guy, heating and air conditioning controls, and so he was learning BASIC. And so I started learning the program in the 6th grade. I actually started the first program I ever wrote, I think, was the Are You Cool quiz. And it was like an A, B, or C. It was color. It was in color. It was text, all text-based, but in color. Is it cooler to A, skateboard, B, rollerblade? C, it was ridiculous.
It's definitely not rollerblading.
Yeah, and so I primarily made my my money, or my way as a programmer. As a matter of fact, I got real lucky when I was younger. I hit college age around the time Facebook was just blowing up, right? Everybody was like, this is the coolest thing, but nobody had really figured out a way to monetize it. And then Coca-Cola jumps on and says, we're going to do a campaign on here. And then all of a sudden it's the biggest campaign since, sliced bread or whatever. And next thing you know, all these social media marketing agencies, there wasn't even social media back then. They were looking for anybody and anything that has written a Facebook app. Well, me being a tinkerer, when Facebook first released its APIs, which was brilliant, I built my first Facebook app, which was some way to meet girls at the bar. And it was a complete flop as well. I think it was madisonbars.com or something like that. Complete flop. No, and I didn't even meet any girls with it, and whatever. But so I built this app, but I knew some people that knew I was a dev, and they knew I had done some Facebook stuff, and they had actually graduated college and went down to work in these agencies down in Chicago. And so all of a sudden, these Chicago agencies are like, we got the Facebook kid here. This guy has built Facebook apps. It's like, I'm like, yeah, sure. And so the next thing I know, I was building voting mechanisms for, I think I did Vanity Fair's New Year's Best Cover voting mechanism once, and then I've done Fiber One, I've done Subway Foods, I've done some Ryan Reynolds movie that you probably wouldn't want to see. I've done a bunch of stuff like that, and I ended up doing Facebook work for about 6 of the big agencies down there, which was really a lot of fun. And I was up here most of the time, living on my friend's couch So it was like, it wasn't bad, but that's how I got into, more advanced programming. But I also had done a lot of startups, and I got to study a lot of great architects. One of my goals when I was younger was to be the Frank Lloyd Wright of computer architecture. And so it's really exciting stuff. You see good architecture and you're a coder. A coder is like a carpenter, but like an architect, you've got to design this whole thing. A coder could be a painter, it could be a plumber, if you're thinking about building a building, but this architect's got to dream up the whole thing. Mm-hmm. So studying a passion for learning that architecture, which evidently, is dyslexia, it's a trait that, architects, there are more dyslexic architects out there. It's one of the professions that dyslexics find easier. There's a really good book called The Dyslexic Advantage. If you ever get a chance to read it and you have dyslexia or a child with dyslexia, you understand that we actually have quite a few advantages because of the dyslexia. So I was able to get more on the architectural side of things and, design these really massive architectures that I've been able to build some really cool stuff with.
Okay. So are you freelance for the most part? To bring in income to fund your life while you work on the book.
Yeah, that's what I have done for years. I'm actually to a point in my career, though, where I've bombed enough startups. I like to say it this way. I've gotten kicked in the teeth enough on startups that big companies will pay me to make sure they don't get those same bumps and problems. So I actually the last 2 or 3 years, I've actually moved more into strategy. I'll still do architectural stuff, but I do like a lot of strategy too, like coming up with market strategies, product market fit, leadership strategies, structuring your team. So it's a much more high level now, and that's the evolution I've hit more in the last 2 or 3 years. But before that, I was a programmer, and I still pick up programming work every once in a while. If I feel like taking a couple months off, just do a job and then get out of here.
Okay.
Yeah, Matt, you're as a dyslexic, you are an incredible company. I know Albert Einstein, Walt Disney, just a few household names that were famous dyslexics that went on to be wildly successful. So we talked a little bit about your failures. Do you want to take us through some of the home runs you've hit in the past, either with startups or other contract work? Really speak to some of the successes you've had.
Well, I can guarantee you this. There's been no home runs I've ever hit on my own. Every home run I've hit has been with a solid backing of a solid team. Whether that be, a team as simple as my parents, who've been incredibly supportive, or the team here at 100 State. 100 State's done amazing things for me. So as far as successes go there, I mean, I've had the luxury, the pleasure, the privilege of doing a lot of really amazing jobs. Like I said, for high profile companies. I once wrote the voting mechanism for the Academy of Country Music Awards. That was really cool. I did the voter registration stuff for the city of Verona. I've had like a lot of very interesting ones. I suppose actually, why am I talking about business? My biggest home runs. My biggest home run, one of my biggest home runs I already told you about is when one of the girls I coach took it upon herself to start her own, charity. One of my other biggest home runs in gymnastics and in life is when I was sitting there once at a meet, and there's this girl. She was probably about 10 at the time, but now she's about to go to college, which is frightening. She leans over to me. We had just got done competing beam. She leans over to me and she says, what's that girl's name on the other teams? There's a girl on there's about 2 other girls, the small little team, 2 other girls, and we had about 10 girls. She's like, what's that girl's name, I'm like, what do you want to know her name for? She's like, because I want to cheer for her. I was like, yeah, I don't know her name, but that's awesome. I don't know. I'd like to take victories and things like that. There's things you just, stuff like that you can't quantify. As a guy that puts stuff into numbers for a living, there's a lot of victories and stuff that just is unquantifiable that I think is quite amazing. So it's like there's no real high score on this video game called life that I care to talk about.
We do talk a lot about failure on the podcast because it just provides such a good learning opportunity for everybody. And obviously you've learned from your failures and you're doing much better now than when you locked yourself in a closet to build something that nobody ended up wanting. So we want to talk now, I guess, about some of the more, finite things that might have helped you along the way and things that hopefully can help everybody who's listening who may be thinking about starting their own business or is just starting out now and maybe looking for that inspiration out there, is there somebody who in business or maybe just in life has been kind of a big inspiration for you going along?
I like to review in my head, as I'm writing this book, especially who I'm going to thank in the book, and I got to start off with my parents. And I mean, well, my mom, for instance, who was a single mother raising me and my brother, which were both a handful. I definitely had the questioning authority spirit at a young age, and the independence, and I definitely got into my fair share of trouble. And so my mom, she, we didn't have a lot of money between the two because you go through a divorce and it's extremely taxing on you, I'm sure. But she always made sure we were, fed a warm breakfast every day, which I thought was, I didn't think of it at the time, but it was like amazing. Most parents just throw you a box of Cheerios and say, get the hell out of here. She always had a warm breakfast on the table every day, and I didn't realize until older how much strength that must have taken to persevere, especially when me and him, my brother, were probably both fighting their tooth and nail because we were such questioning authority. So that's, I gotta say thanks to my mom, but I actually can talk about a teacher I had too once. I talk about autonomy. I had this really amazing teacher, Miss Lewinberg, and I had another amazing teacher, Mr. Vincent, which both teachers gave me a lot of autonomy. When I was taking this desktop publishing class, junior in high school, and Miss Lewinberg noticed that I had skills in computers already. She's like, you're bored out of your mind, which most teachers have been like, just sit down, focus up, straighten up, and you get bored, and of course you're going to rebel or do something else. And she's like, here's this new thing called Flash, which is, addictinggames.com, all that stuff was made out of, but this is right when it was starting. And so I ended up spending, I think, 2 semesters building a Street Fighter-like video game instead, and it was awesome, and I aced that class. But I mean, if you would have given me assignments, there's no way I could have actually aced it. Vincent as well, he gave me a lot of autonomy as well, probably for somewhat different reasons. Vincent also wins the award for the teacher I'd probably like to go to Vegas with the most. He's a crazy guy. But those are 2 people that in my life I think were very important. I've had a ton of great mentors and still do, and I wish I could thank each and every one of them, but your podcast isn't that long.
Yeah, well, I'm sure they know that you appreciate them. So we'll go on to talk about written form of inspiration. Is there a book out there that you really think impacted your journey in entrepreneurship?
Yeah, there are lots of books that have impacted, but I can tell you the one, this is so cliche in a lot of ways, but it totally made the difference. But The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss has been quite impactful, which is interesting though, because as I get older, I'm less into the 4-hour stuff. I have a philosophy about craftsmanship. I mean, everybody wants the 1-minute egg, 5-minute abs, whatever. But if you read the book Mastery by Robert Greene, then there's a lot of really amazing books out there on the subject. And as I train athletes at a really high level, and I see people that have emerged, is that there's no 4-hour fix or anything like that. And I realize that's not really what he's talking about, but he does talk a lot about, accelerated learning and stuff like that. And it's like, maybe I'm just slow or whatever, but, sometimes it pays to spend a decade learning, to do something, or a couple. And the product you get at the end is maybe only marginally better in some ways, but in a lot of ways, like the devil's in the details, you get some really cool stuff. So, sorry, 4-Hour Workweek definitely dug me out of a trench once.
Awesome, and that's one that I know I
actually got to say thanks to Tim in person too, which is really
Did you really?
Cool. Yeah, I met him at South by Southwest.
You hear Justin's tone change there?
Yeah.
He's somebody that I kind of look up to just a little bit. So.
Yeah.
All right. Cool.
Plus, he's teaching me to cook right now.
Did you get the audiobook?
The 4-Hour Chef. No, I got that one, the big bulky one.
Actual 1,000-page book.
Yeah. It was his mashed cauliflower recipe. Killer.
Is it? All right, I'll have to check that. I got the audio version, so I'll have to check that out. I haven't listened to the whole thing yet.
I got the audio version of 4-Hour Body, and it's just too many numbers. It doesn't. You can't listen. You got
tough to listen to that one.
Audiobook of charts.
Well, is there another resource or tool that you find yourself using almost every day?
Well, this is going to sound like a flagrant plug, but 100 State has been incredibly, I don't know, for those of you that are listening to this and the rest of the world, you probably don't know what 100 State is, but 100 State is a co-working space, and the community here is just amazing. And so, I mean, last year, this actually, they through this network of people, well, let me go back for a second. Remember that first time I locked myself in the closet and coded for months on end? Mm-hmm. I didn't have anybody calling me out saying, "Don't do that, you idiot! Don't spend your life savings and just get And luckily, throughout as time goes on, I've met some really amazing people. One of them being Mike Fenchel. Actually, he's the guy that got me down to South by Southwest to meet Tim Ferriss, but not important. So the community here, though, having a community, even if you don't have a community at all, people don't view it as a tool, but having that basis of people to bounce ideas off of, or to pat you on the back when things are down, or to help you, pick you up at the end of the day, or to keep you on track, to keep you honest to yourself, because you don't want to keep an idea to yourself. You want to go out there and tell people, so that way they kind of hold you accountable. It's the same reason I'm spouting off about my book before it's actually finished. Hopefully it could motivate me to get it done.
There you go. So, we're gonna hold you to it. We're gonna interview you again the day after you said you'd release it, and we'll make sure that you did.
Good job.
Well, if anybody's listened to, this is episode 10, if anybody's listened to the first 9, they know what 100 State is.
Excellent.
Yeah.
We could just rename the podcast. What do you think, Jordan? The 100 State Podcast?
I think in the naming convention would be appropriate.
100 Podcast?
100 Podcasts.
I just started a 100 writers group here. And,
yep.
Well, yeah, it's certainly important, and again, if you've listened to the first 10 episodes, you've noticed the trend already that just having the sounding board, really, of other people like-minded around you is so incredibly important. If you're trying to do it on your own, it can be done, obviously. Anything can be done, but it's just so much easier if you find that community. So if you're listening to this and you're in Madison, definitely look up 100 State. If you're not in Madison, Wisconsin, there are hundreds of groups like it all over the country, all over the world. Just go out and find it. I mean, the value that you get out of it, I mean, we pay to be 100 State members, but the amount we pay is just, it's irrelevant compared to what you get out of it. So how can people get a hold of you? So plug your book, obviously, plug your website, and let people know how they can get in touch with you if they have questions or just want to encourage you.
Yeah, sounds good. So the blog I've primarily been using, the website for Ship or Get Off the Pot, and it has a lot of different articles that I've written, kind of testing the waters in the lean startup way. I wanted to know what was most popular. Is shiporgetoffthepot.com. So that's SHIP or getoffthepot.com. And so that has a lot of my contact information there. Of course, you can always reach me at matt@100state.com as well. So that's probably the easiest way to just email me.
Thanks again, Matt, for joining us. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We'll catch you on the next episode.
Thanks again for joining us today. If you like what you hear, head over to driventobetter.com. Check out the show notes where we'll have everything we talked about here today. You can just search the name of the guest or their company, and that should pop up for you. While you're there, consider joining our DTB Plus Club. If you're not sure what that is, some of our guests will come to us with special offers, giveaways, contests, or discounts for our audience. The only way to get these is to become a member of the DTB Plus Club. In addition to bi-weekly emails with these offers, you'll also get exclusive access to the Plus Club private Facebook page. This is a place where like-minded entrepreneurs and soon-to-be entrepreneurs gather and exchange ideas, tips, and advice. Our guests talk a lot about having a support community, and the DTB Plus Club is just that. The best part is it's absolutely free to join, so head over to driventobetter.com now and check it out. Thanks again. See you next time.